Jews, an ethno-religious group descended from the ancient Hebrews, were scattered all over the world a century ago. The Jewish community, which faced intense discrimination, especially in Europe, where they were lived in large numbers, searched for a place where they could establish an independent state for a very long time. Although places from all over the world were considered for a Jewish state, there was actually only one option for the Jews. According to them, Jerusalem and the surrounding lands were promised to them by God. In the manifesto issued at the end of the Zionist Congress held in Basel in 1897, it was stated that the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine was aimed. Years later, in order to gain the support of influential Jewish politicians in the American government for the First World War, United Kingdom published the Balfour Declaration. According to this declaration, United Kingdom would support the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. After the First World War, Jews from all over the world began to come to Palestine, which came under British rule after the Turkish rule, in order to establish a Jewish state. After the Second World War, in which 6 million Jews suffered genocide, the newly established United Nations announced the plan to establish an Arab and a Jewish state in Palestine. With this statement, conflicts began between Arabs and Jews in Palestine. In 1948, one day before Britain withdrew from Palestine, the Jews declared that they had established the State of Israel. With this, the 1948 war began, which would be the first of many Arab-Israeli wars. In 1948, in addition to the Palestinian Arabs, Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, and Syria declared war on Israel in a coordinated manner. After 9 months of war, Israel emerged victorious. With the lands they gained in the war, Israel now owned 78% of Palestine. While Gaza came under Egyptian control, the West Bank came under Jordanian control. In 1949, immediately after the war, Israel declared Jerusalem as its capital. By 1967, the Second Arab-Israeli War took place. Israel hit Egypt's air bases with a surprise attack, paralyzing Egypt's air capability. Israel expanded its territory tremendously by defeating the coalition of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan in 6 days. It took Gaza from Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula, Egypt's only territory on the Asian continent, the West Bank from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. After the Six-Day War, a Cold War began between Israel and the Arab states. In particular, the loss of the Sinai Peninsula, which forms the eastern bank of the Suez Canal, was unacceptable to Egypt. Therefore, it did not take long for a new war to break out. In 1973, on Yom Kippur, a Jewish holy day that gave its name to the war, Egypt and Syria attacked Israel simultaneously. In this war, where Israel had the hardest time and came closest to losing, Israel managed to win with the great support of the United States. Israel gained some new territory west of the Suez Canal, in Africa, and north of the Golan Heights in Syria. 5 years after the war, in 1978, some agreements were signed between Israel and Egypt through the mediation of the United States. As a result of these agreements, called the Camp David Accords, Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula and allowed the establishment of autonomous Palestinian administrations in Gaza and the West Bank. Egypt, on the other hand, officially recognized the State of Israel, which it had until then called the Zionist Entity. This was a huge step back for the Arab world. Egypt, seen as the leader of the Arabs, had accepted a normalization process with Israel. Egypt's participation in the Arab League was suspended. These agreements meant the end of a united Arab front against Israel. In 1987, the First Intifada began. During the Intifada, which means rebellion, Palestinian Arabs living in Israel and the Israeli-occupied territories took actions such as work stoppages, protests, and attacking security forces. These were unorganized protests that emerged from the public. Even though the protests were suppressed, the world, which believed that the Palestine problem was solved with the agreement between Israel and Egypt, saw that this problem still continues. In the following years, agreements were signed between the Palestine Liberation Organization and Israel to increase autonomy in Gaza and the West Bank. In 1994, Israel also signed a peace agreement with Jordan, and the borders between the two countries were finalized with this agreement. So, like that, another country from the Arab front made an agreement with Israel and withdrew from the alliance against the Jewish state. At the beginning of the new millennium, the Second Intifada began. This was a more organized uprising, this time starting with the visit of the leader of the Israeli opposition to the Temple Mount after the collapse of peace talks between the Palestine Liberation Organization and Israel. Unlike the First Intifada, this was a much harsher response, with suicide attacks, bombings, and rocket fire. With the Second Intifada, the secular Palestine Liberation Organization lost power, while Hamas, an Islamic movement, began to gain more support among Palestinians. Even though this uprising was suppressed, Israel had to withdraw from Gaza. In late 2008, Israel attacked Gaza, citing the attacks of Hamas against Israel from Gaza, and at the end of this 3-week war, Israel withdrew from Gaza again without any significant gains. A similar operation was repeated in 2004, but Israel again failed to achieve any significant success. However, civilians living in Gaza suffered many casualties as they were caught in the conflict between Hamas and Israel. In 2017, the United States recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This move, which received a lot of negative reaction from the international community, was another indicator of America's unconditional and unlimited support for Israel. Until October 7, 2023, the situation was like that in the region. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched an attack unprecedented in Israeli history, using both rockets from Gaza and crossing the border between Gaza and Israel with more than 2,000 members of the organization.